After sort of an up and down season, we finally come to the conclusion of this show, and unfortunately, like many of the recent Marvel television entries, this finale is just ripe with disappointment. Remember to like and subscribe, and if you're new, check out the rest of the channel and let me know what you think. Let's dive into Agatha All Along, episodes 8 and 9. Let's go back and reflect. You'll know if you've seen any of my previous reviews of this series that I did enjoy it for the most part. A few of the episodes towards the middle got a little too campy and silly for my liking, but all around I thought it was a fun show. It wasn't anything spectacular, but I dug the sort of dark magic, witchy, spooky aesthetic. Kathryn Hahn's performance is incredible, as well as Aubrey Plaza's. And I thought there were a lot of creative and interesting ideas that were set up throughout. After this series lost me towards about the halfway point, these past few episodes really reinvigorated my interest in this show, and I got hopeful that this show would supersede a lot of these MCU finales and end with a bang. So we got a 2-episode finale, which leads me to my biggest complaint of this finale as a whole, which is why. I thought episode 8 did a great job of finishing off what was set up. Jen, Billy, and Agatha all come to their last trial. Jen successfully regains her powers, drawing them out of Agatha before returning to reality. Billy, with Agatha's help, is able to, it seems like, seek out a host for Tommy to eventually occupy. And Agatha is seemingly finally able to overcome the death of her son. Once returned to reality, Agatha is confronted by Rio about the deal they made at the beginning of this episode. Billy has cheated death and broken the sacred rules. Rio must take his soul or Agatha's. Agatha vows to give up Billy. However, after a quick, kind of lame battle utilizing their powers, Billy and Agatha are overwhelmed by Rio. In her last moments, Agatha decides to give her life to save Billy's, and finally faces the enemy she's been running from her entire life. This episode ends with Billy returning home, utilizing clues found around his bedroom to realize that the road itself does not exist, but was manifested as a pocket reality by him containing his version of the road, inspired by the many interests that he's gathered over his life. Just before the credits, we hear Agatha's laugh behind him, and it cuts to black. I really enjoyed episode 8. I think it's one of the strongest in the series as a whole. It's very emotional. All 3 of the coven that are left come face to face with their darkest traumas. The performances all around are great, and even though I thought the action in the final standoff could have been executed better, it was a joy to finally get to see these characters utilize their powers after 8 episodes pretty much without them. And I thought the twist and the cliffhanger were both nice touches added in. This should have been it. The series should have ended here with Billy, Tommy, and Agatha's story left to be picked up in whatever project comes next. But Marvel thought, we need one more episode. Just for no reason at all. Episode 9 just flat out should not exist. This episode, I guess it was supposed to tie up any loose ends left over from the series and give us a look at what is coming down the road, but it really doesn't do any of that. Everything that was set up throughout the series has pretty much already been paid off. So the majority of this episode is dedicated to flashbacks showing us Agatha's journey to this point, why and how she gains her power, and why she takes powers from others. And it also highlights her relationship with Rio and her son, as well as her son's passing. This was just so jarring because it didn't really service this episode. It services the series as a whole, sure, but not this individual episode. It was a strange choice for the finale to kick off in this way. This should have been part of episode 1. And why it wasn't is beyond me, and it really just hinders this finale. And after all of this, there's only about 10 minutes left in this episode. Agatha becomes a ghost, and Billy and her set out together to find Tommy. That final 10 minutes could have just been tacked on to episode 8. There was really no reason for it. This final 30 to 40 minute episode to end this series just does not really serve any purpose, and I just don't understand why the writers constructed the narrative in this manner. Now, I will say I did very much appreciate that this series as a whole avoided a lot of the issues that most of the recent MCU shows have faced. The biggest criticism of a lot of these series is that they all feel so incredibly rushed. Things are set up and characters are introduced throughout, and none of it really gets addressed until the finale, when the writers breeze through everything to make sure all the loose ends get tied up in a very unsatisfactory way. Agatha, though, avoids this. All of the ideas that are introduced through this series are all addressed along the way. The conclusion doesn't feel rushed like the rest, and had it ended on episode 8, I probably would have been pretty satisfied with this series as a whole. But they had to just toss in that final episode unnecessarily. I think overall this series is better than a lot of the recent MCU entries. There are many aspects that I enjoyed, mainly Han and Plaza, the vibe and the aesthetic. The set designs were great. They utilized some really cool and creative narrative choices to progress the story along in some interesting ways. That being said, it isn't on par with shows like Loki or WandaVision. There's some villains like the Salem 7 who are just kind of introduced and forgotten about. I don't think Plaza, while I enjoyed her a lot in this show, I don't think her character got utilized quite enough. And there are a few performances that I took issue with, mainly with Joe Locke. There's one episode that really just focuses on him, and I just don't think he has the acting chops to carry a whole production by himself. And at a few points, it just gets way too silly to the point where it really just takes you out of the whole experience of this show. But listen, I can see where Marvel and Feige are trying to right the ship and bring us back to the level of quality that we were all so used to for so long. This series is well paced, it's thoughtful, it's emotional, which is a lot to say compared to some of the recent projects that we've been getting. I think the tides are turning back to where this franchise wants to be. This show, it's not going to correct all of the MCU's issues, it's not going to garner like incredible reviews or anything like that. But it avoids a lot of the issues from the past few years, and I think that that is a step in the right direction, especially for Marvel Television. While I wouldn't say that Agatha All Along is one of my favorites, I do think it is worth the watch.